Are you struggling to regain sustainability in your life and create a positive life stance? If so, listen in as courageous women share their empowering struggle of how they came through the trenches to restart and recreate a victorious life worth living. They took their power back. Learn the secrets of how they did it, and you can too. Welcome to the Real Heart Talk podcast and 360 Network for Women. And here's your host, Pamela Duran.
Welcome to Real Heart Talk. You Are Enough podcast, aired on 360 Talk Radio for Women. So excited to have Rayna Neises with us tonight. And she is the nicest. She's a certified life coach, speaker, and blogger. She is armed with overwhelmed daughters who are in a season of caring for the aging parent. That's what she wants to do, is link arms with you if you are a daughter of an aging parent, and to give you encouragement and resources so that you guys are not alone and you're not forgotten and you're cared for and do not feel neglected. She has been where you are. She lost her dad to Alzheimer's disease after a long 14-year journey. And though she lived 220 miles from her dad's home, she was one of his hands-on caregivers for the last 4.5 years of his life. He requested to stay at home as long as he could. And so Rayna was able to make that happen. And she is going to share with us today her journey and also her expertise in helping you through your journey. Welcome, Rayna.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you.
Yes, it's so good. I'm so happy that we met at the Spark Media Conference and we got to know each other. And I really appreciate you being on to share your journey with your dad, and then to just talk about how you in turn help others get through their journey.
Yeah, definitely. You know, my dad actually was not the first that I had to step into a caregiving role with. My mom was actually diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was 16 years old, and she lived 12 years with the disease, and my dad was her primary caregiver. So I was just kind of the support to him, and being able to send him off when I could and stay with her and offer him respites. He loved to play softball, and so I would come in and stay with her. So after about 7 years after her passing, then we got the news that my dad was diagnosed as well. So it was really traumatic to have that diagnosis with him after already walking that walk with my mom.
So that's just so sad. I have encountered that a little bit with one of my uncles and his wife's mom, but being there with them and having that diagnosis, I mean, what was that like? If you want to share a little bit of how they felt, and then how you started dealing with it, and then how you felt as a daughter and your siblings.
I think it was really hard. Especially with my mom, I was so young. It was hard to even look at your parents as being people, right? You're a teenager. The whole world revolves around you and all the things that are important to kids. So it was really hard. I wasn't really told that my mom received the diagnosis. It was back in the day when there was 2 phones to the one phone line, and I overheard my dad actually talking to someone else. And I thought, what in the world is that? And I actually wrote my senior English paper on Alzheimer's to be able to learn more about it. And because my mom was only 53, I actually all the research said probably 4 to 6 years was all that I would have her around. So It was really devastating. And I was so thankful for my faith. The Lord always knows what's coming so far before we it's never on the radar for us, right? And so my best friend had moved away at the beginning of 8th grade, and I was so devastated. We were going to do junior high together, and she's gone. And I saved up all of my money, and I flew to her new home and spent a week with her. And she had been to youth camp, and she was reading the Bible every day, and she started challenging me. I'd had a walk with the Lord since I was in 3rd grade, but that real personal, just pour your heart out to God relationship started that summer. And so for me to already have him as my best friend in this season of life where no one else could really understand what I was going through was such an invaluable piece of that.
Mhm.
So it was so difficult because in that season of my life, my parents were pretty authoritarian. And so when my mom would say, Rayna didn't tell me where she was, I was in trouble. And actually, that was part of why my dad actually took my mom and talked to her about memory loss, was because I just said, things aren't right. Something's wrong, because I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I was getting in trouble. So there were just so many emotions involved in that. And just the thought of her passing so quickly, so young in my life. She actually lived 12 years, but she was nonverbal for 8 of those 12 years. So
Oh,
she was very happy-go-lucky, not combative at all, but at the same time, to have your mom be able to give you words of wisdom or just even basics, it wasn't a part of growing up. So
mhm.
it was really difficult. I do have one older sister, and she was gone to college by the time my mom was diagnosed. So, um, so I think it was even worse when we had the diagnosis with my dad, because we had walked that and we knew what it was like to have that parent not know who you are. And there's nothing really quite like that, to have them forget you. So I think it was
Mhm.
even more difficult to just accept that diagnosis. And for me, it was a matter of just going to prayer and just honestly, it was like, really, Lord, what are you doing? Are we really doing this again? And
Mhm.
just having to go back to that place of just surrender and just say, okay, I know you're here and I know you've got this. None of that makes sense right now, but I'm going to trust you. So
So backing up just a little bit with your mom, what age were you
I was
when?
16 when she was
Oh,
diagnosed.
16. My goodness. That is so young. And then your daughter, you said your sister was at college. So
Mhm.
ah, I know that probably those 4 to 6 years before she became nonverbal, or at least 4 years. I mean, were you able to have like those brief moments of mother daughter, or it was not like that at all?
You know, it really wasn't. My mom was an amazing mom, but I don't really remember conversations. So I don't remember her saying how she felt. I think there was a lot of
Mm,
that going on with my dad, just them trying to struggle through this together, being so young. But there really wasn't a lot of conversation with my mom. And
mm,
so I can remember them moving me to college and, dropping me off and getting hugs and kisses and that being it. There were no phone calls home. There was no you won't believe what happened kind of thing. We just didn't have that kind of conversation. I don't know if we would have if she was healthy or not, but it definitely was not, we just didn't get to have that mother-daughter beyond just those raising years, those early years where she poured so
mm.
much into me.
Yes, God bless you. And that you had your friend who poured into you,
Yeah.
that gave you that support, and then you got closer to Christ. He is always there for us, isn't he?
He is. Yeah.
So what? Oh, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just even when we can't even imagine, it's just I'm so thankful that I can look back and see all those provisions, because sometimes, well, life is hard and those really hard things come. And if we don't realize how faithful he is,
Mm.
like with the second diagnosis, if I hadn't seen his faithfulness through losing my mom the way that I did, I wouldn't have been able to say, okay, this doesn't seem fair, but I'm going to trust you in it.
Mm. I know. He just gives us strength beyond our comprehension a lot
Mhm.
of the times when we are walking through such a dark valley, as the Psalms 23 says. He's there with us though, through
Yes.
that time. Now with your dad, you were saying he was such an outgoing person and so active. So it sounds like maybe it was a little different with his journey. If you want to
Very
share
different.
some about that.
Yeah. So, one of the things I always encourage people is acknowledge who the person is, because as we age, we still are who we have always been. We are who God
Mm,
made us to be, and we're all so different. So there is no cookie cutter. And that's part of why that individual support, I think, is so important, because understanding what you've always had and who they've always been, they're not, the disease changes them some, but they're not changing. They're not becoming something they weren't before. So
mm,
my mom was she was a homebody. She just was a homemaker. She loved to do those things. She loved to read and just the quiet of life. My dad, on the other hand, had played professional baseball. He continued to play softball. He played handball. He was so busy and active and very outgoing. And so for him to stay at home was important because we wanted to keep him engaged in all those activities. My dad was in his early 70s when he was diagnosed. He continued to travel with the ball teams and play for quite a few years after that until he felt like he was starting to, struggle a little bit more. And so as his disease progressed, it was really important for us to keep him engaged and keep him active because that's what meant so much to him. So one of the things that I found was like when the doctor told us he needs to stop driving, it was like, oh, we can't do that to him. What are we going to do? So I immediately got on the phone and started calling around for caregivers. His sister was living with him at the time, but she had her own things to do. So they were doing a lot of the home tasks together. But as far as all day, every day, that wasn't what they were doing. And so she would go to the gym. And so we did change his membership so he could go to the gym with her, but he loved to play volleyball 3 times a week. And that wasn't something she enjoyed. And so that was one of the first things I did was find someone, caregiver, somebody we could pay to take him to be able to keep him engaged. Mm-hmm. At this point, he's 80 years old or 78 years old, but he's still that active. And that was so important to him. So for me to find someone who could provide that service for our family was the first step to start looking at, okay, we can't do this by ourselves. We've got to get other people involved. And that's part of how we progressed to that point in which we kept him in his home and brought all of the support to him, allowing him to continue doing the things that he loved as long as possible.
That's such a wise decision too, to bring in a caregiver and get that extra support. I mean, they are there. A lot of times people don't like to ask for help, but they are there to really come alongside and help the family. Now, when he couldn't drive anymore, how did you guys handle that? Because I know we went through that with my dad, and he just did not want to give up those keys. So how did y'all handle that for people that are listening that are maybe going through the same struggle with their own parents?
It is such a struggle, but I'll tell you, it wasn't near the struggle as we expected because we really put those people around him that when he wanted to go, that was their job, was to go with him. So it was a little harder when he and his sister were living together because there were times that he would want to go and she would say, oh, well, let's do that tomorrow or whatever. But really the key was whenever he wanted to go somewhere, we just had somebody available to do that. And so I really thought there's no way he's going to let somebody else drive his car. But he did. He let the caregiver step in and be like, okay, Bob, it's time to go to volleyball. And he'd be like, let's go. And he'd get in the car and he was okay with them driving. So I was so surprised that transition was as easy as it was. Now, probably it had been almost 3 years since he had driven and he wanted to go and my aunt didn't listen and he hopped in the car and he drove away and he was gone for about 3 hours. With no idea where he was. And of course, I was so far away from home. I didn't even know about it till they had found him. And we had talked to my aunt. I'm like, they always left the keys in the car in the garage. And we had said, you really, really need to put those keys somewhere else. And she just never dreamed he would do it. They had a disagreement. She went upstairs. She thought he would follow her. And the next thing she knows, she heard the garage door going up and him leaving. And so we had those traumatic times. And thank heavens that my brother-in-law just started driving the neighborhood and he found my dad. He said he pulled up next to him, rolled down the window and he said, hey, Bob, what are you doing? And he goes, yeah, I'm just driving around. And he goes, would you like to follow me home? And he's like, yeah. And so he did, so it was really interesting. I think the key though is just always having that available person. And again, as my aunt left and we brought caregivers in, one of the main rules we had to the caregivers was if he wants to leave, you're leaving. If he's asking you to go home, you just say, okay, Bob, let's just jump in the car. And there's nothing that an ice cream cone at McDonald's won't solve. And so oftentimes that's what it was just get in the car, go get some ice cream and then be like, come on home. And he would come in and be settled in. So I think part of it is, I love Teepa Snow. I've been trained in her positive approach to care for dementia. And one of the things she says is if we push with our agenda, they're going to push back. We need to join their reality. We need to join their agenda. When there's something they want, you help them get it. You don't push back with your agenda and say, no, we can't do that. Or no, it's 2:00 in the morning. You go with the moment and you let them have what they need, or it gets ugly and it's not fun. So.
Yeah. No, I love that. As much as you can, just
Yep.
go with the flow, with them. I know with my uncle and aunt, I mean, his wife, she was my aunt, but his wife, her mom would love music. So when I would play, she knew every word and she was fine. But, if I wasn't playing the music every 5 minutes, she would ask me when I got there, or who I was, so it's just keeping them in their train and in their flow. I think, like you said, that really keeps them at that peace. And plus, you and your faith, praying, and I'm sure your dad was a faithful man as well. To have that peace, God's going to bring peace in that situation during those times.
Yeah, I can't imagine not having my faith to just rely on, both for myself and just all that God was doing in my life and helping me let go of all the things I think I can control, to, really being able to just pour out that grief to him and just know that, he was faithful to process it with me, and he didn't fix it. It didn't go away. We didn't have the happily ever after in that way, but we had so many cherished memories. We had so many opportunities to really love on each other in a way that we would never have if this wasn't the journey. If I hadn't spent 4.5 years with my dad, 3 days a week, most weeks, then there's so many things I wouldn't have to hold on to today. And we forget as adults, we are so busy with our own lives that we don't spend the time with our parents as adults that, that I got to do that. And so I think that's one of the many blessings of caregiving.
That is so special, because that is really all they want when they get that age, is to spend time.
It is. It really is.
With their loved ones. So that matters a lot. Okay. So what is one scripture that you just clung to or spoke to you during all the time or the hardest time that could just, revive you and revive your spirit? Just give you that faith going message.
Gosh, I don't know. I think at different seasons, there were different times that the Lord really brought things to me. One of them that I found was in 1 Corinthians, I believe it's 16:14, and it's do all things in love. And that was what I had. And so especially there's this story that I love to share. So I had 3 nights a week to put my dad to bed. And if you've dealt with people with Alzheimer's very often, you know that by the end of the day, it just gets hairy between what they call sundowners. There's a lot of confusion, but I really think of it as kind of just, here's your bowl, it's full, and every decision you make, everything you do, it takes out of that bowl. And by the end of the day, they're just empty. And I couldn't tell you why. And it wasn't the same night of the 3 nights, but there was always one night that he would just not understand what I needed him to do. I mean, we went from bedtime routine being 15, 20 minutes to, on a bad night, an hour and a half to 2 hours. Dad had this little bathroom right off of the bedroom. And luckily I could stand in the doorway and pretty much just take up all this space, because I could get him into the bathroom and be like, hey, Dad, can you take off your shoes? Can you take off your shirt? And we would get into nighttime briefs. He was incontinent, but only at night. And so we would get to those nighttime briefs and we would need to change jammies because, oh my gosh, it was a flood every night. And so there were just things we had to do. It wasn't really an option to let him go to bed in his Levi's and his belt. It just wasn't going to work. So I really had to stick to it. And I would stand there and I would just give him time and I would ask, can you take him off? Can you put the jammies on? And, I did all the things I did every other night and it just wouldn't work. He would say yes, and he just wouldn't do it. And so I came home and if you pushed, this is where I had to learn. If you pushed, that's when we got the ugly. That's when you got hit. That's when I heard curse words the first time. I'd never heard my dad talk like that. And so it was just so emotionally draining and difficult on those nights. And I talked to my husband every night at 11 o'clock, and I came home one weekend and I was just spent and I was just sad and so hard. And he's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "I just don't know what else to do. I've done everything." And he just said, "Well, what if you just put your arms around him and just tell him that you loved him?" Like, he'd hit me. That's what, I mean, my instant reaction was like, "You aren't there. You don't know what it's like." I spent hours trying to be, I'm being nice. I couldn't hear it in the moment. So the very next week, I'm standing in the doorway again, having the same conversation with my dad. It's not going well. And I hear my husband, "Well, what if you were just to tell him you loved him?" So I step into the bathroom and I wrap my arms around my dad. And I hold him, and he's just got his fist clenched. He's just, tucked up in there, and he's just stiff as a board. And I'm just holding him and I'm saying, "Daddy, I love you. You're okay. Everything's okay. You're safe. I love you. I'm here to help you." And I'm holding him, and eventually his arms relax and he wraps his arms around me and hugs me back. And I just stand there just telling him, "I love you, Daddy. You're safe." And so we just had that moment for as long as it took to just kind of get through the emotion of it. And I kind of eventually dropped my hands and I stepped back, and he looked up at me and he said, "What do you need me to do?" I said, "I need you to take off your pants." Like, it really is. That's all I need. I just need you to get your jammies on. So, but in that moment, the Lord just really brought to me how important it is to do everything in love. And so many times we have our agendas and we are just trying to do what needs to be done. And it's not that I wasn't kind, it's that I wasn't taking time to just reassure him and do it with love, that he knew it, that was why I was there. And that's what I was there to do. And so that scripture became so important to me, to just remember, always extend that hand, have that compassion in the moment, and the thing will get done. And it will probably get done faster with the compassion than it did without, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they can feel it. Like they can feel when you're trying to rush them. "Okay, just do it."
Yes.
You might not be saying it like that, but inside you're feeling it.
For sure.
So yeah, when you relax and you really extended that love, that Jesus extends to us,
Yes.
he could feel that and know, that it's okay.
Yep.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you being so courageous and brave to share. And I know through all that, both with your mom and dad, that you have birthed your seasons of giving. So let's talk about that. Let's turn it a little bit, and you share how that you give back and help others.
So with my dad's passing, with Alzheimer's, we often call it the long goodbye. I mean, 14 years is a really long time. And you have all this grief, you have this loss step by step. My dad and I were in business together, and we reached that point which he couldn't, participate in that. And that was a grief. There's just all these griefs as you go through. So when he passed, I didn't really expect it to be quite so overwhelming. And so the grief was really pretty intense. I know I was only 28 when my mom passed away. I was in a different season of life. And I definitely was grieved, but it was so different than it was with my dad. And I'm not sure if it's just because the last parent, I think, is a little different. For me, I felt really untethered. My daddy was my safe place my whole life, no matter what was happening, no matter if I was the good guy or the bad guy in the situation, I was always the good guy to him. It was always, he was there. He was that safe place to land. So having him gone hit me really hard. And so I had been coaching Christian women in transition, and I just really struggled with all of the mental impacts that grief have on our brain, the concentration, the energy level, just so many things. And as I prayed through, okay, Lord, what are we doing? Because I really felt like once I didn't have that large need in my life, I would have all this space and I'd have all this room to be able to just really blossom in my coaching business. And instead of that, the Lord's like, actually, we're going to start from scratch. And I'm like, yay. So he really laid on my heart to make that pivot with my business and say, come alongside other people that are walking where you've been, Rayna, and show them how they can have hope even in the middle of the pain. And so that's what we did was I've made that shift, and I created a season of caring to support people who are in a season of caring, who that season of life, I think it's important that we realize it's only a season of life. It's only a short time. And we're going to make sacrifices, and life's going to look different, and we're not going to get to do all the fun vacations we might have done, or we might not be able to make it to every birthday party, but it's a season, and it's a valuable, cherished time. And if we approach it with intention, we can pick and choose, and we can make decisions that leave us with no regrets. So at the same time as I was challenged to make that pivot in my business, the Lord brought back to my memory a couple of people who said to me, one in particular was the director of the day stay that my dad used to go to. At his funeral, came and wrapped me in a hug and just said, "You girls need to write a book." I was like, "Oh, what would we write a book about?" And she said, "What you've done as people who don't know anything about care, about nursing or doctors or any of that." She's like, "You need to share how you cared for your dad, because he was so loved, so cared for, and so supported all the way through to the end." And so that came back to me. And I had a couple other people who said the same thing. "How did you do that and not go crazy? How did you do?" Why so many times when people find themselves caregiving, you find people bitter and resentful. And that wasn't my experience. That wasn't how I journeyed through it. I knew I was called, and I knew I was responding what God wanted me to do, but I also knew that I needed to do it with intention. I needed to make sure that when I walked him all the way home, I still had a life. I still had friends. I still had a husband. I still had relationships with people that were important in my life. Everything couldn't look the same. I mean, I was gone half the week, but I could still make sure that those relationships were intact. And so I was very intentional in expressing my appreciation to those around me, in asking. I used to say, I need to have lunch with my fun friend. And I'd call and say, "Let's just get it on the calendar. I just need to laugh." I made sure to spend time investing in those things. And so I knew that that needed to be a part of the message as well. You can do this. You can walk them all the way home, and you can still have a life that you love. And you can have a life that honors them and their legacy beyond you too, because sometimes when we bury them, we've buried ourselves, because we've given up everything. And the legacy of that's their legacy, our life is in ruins by the time they're gone. And so I was able to then, through some coaching and just God opening doors, I have a book that's No Regrets, Hope for Your Caregiving Season. And it was published in June of 21. And so God just really helped me to be able to put that message out there. It's the first 10 chapters are kind of the how-tos with stories. How do you manage all that medicine? How do you deal with hiring all this help? Because you become this manager of all these people. We had 12 people working for us, supporting us, between the person who mowed the grass and the person who cleaned the house and the people who were coming in and caregiving. And we had massage therapists, and we had, just all these different people that we supported my dad with. We built this team around him, my sister and myself and my aunt. It was a team. And so as I talk about that in the book of just how we built that team, and then the last 6 chapters are tools and things that I did for my own self-care. How did I take care of me? How did I stay sane and really love my life, even in the midst of these really hard trials that were there? So,
yeah, self-care is very important. So you said something about some people get bitter and resentful. And if anybody's listening and you're in that space, what would you say to them? Is it covered in your book? And what tips would you give them to? It's a release, right? They have to release that bitterness and that resentfulness. So what can you share with them?
So I think it's not as much in the book other than the self-care pieces of it. And that's because I didn't see it until I was in the midst of supporting those that are caring. And I began to realize how much we are not caring for ourselves in that season. And that's what leads to that. We have to know we have needs. So one of the things that I feel like I did well, and I would really encourage you to do if you're feeling resentful and you're feeling stuck in that place, is take time every week and ask yourself some questions. How am I? See, I had almost 4 hours to drive home every time I took care of my dad. So I could hit these questions pretty hard. And the Lord and I could talk through these things. And if there needed to be tears, if there needed to be changes, then we could brainstorm that together. And that's really what I did. How am I? I am exhausted. I am not doing well. I need something different. So then the next question is, what do you need, Rayna? I need more sleep. Okay. How can you get more sleep? And so start problem solving. Okay, I need the caregivers to stay longer on Saturday. I need to be able to turn it off and go downstairs and just sleep for 3.5 hours and then get up and get myself ready for the day and take on the rest of the day. I figured out what I needed. I needed better food. How was I going to do that? I'm torn in all these different directions. What am I going to do to take care of what I'm eating and not be driving through all the time? So I had to ask myself those questions. How am I? What do I need? And then I had to ask myself my question, how is dad? Because that's the whole point. Why am I there? It was all about him. So how is he? And if he's not good, what does he need? What do I need to do to support him? So we mentioned, he's so active and loved to do things. Well, summers in Missouri are muggy and hot. And he, when you get older, your body just doesn't regulate temperature well. And so he would want to be outside because that's what he loved to do. And so I was always telling him, oh, we can't do that because on the weekends we didn't have our other activities. And so I was like, what can I do with him? I went to Walmart and I picked up a ping pong net that goes on your kitchen table. And the first time I pulled that ping pong net out, and one of the memories from my childhood was playing ping pong with my dad. And so I thought, I don't know if he can do this. Let's just give it a try. We played for 3 hours, listening to Elvis, laughing, and we just had such an amazing time. It wasn't within 3 weeks. I told my husband, get on Craigslist. We need a ping pong table. And we moved all the formal dining room furniture against the walls. We put the ping pong table up and we played 3 weeks before he passed away. We played ping pong. So what he needed was things to keep him engaged. And we needed him to stay in that place where he had purpose in life. And I needed to figure out how to do that. And so I think checking in with yourself and then checking in on the person you're caring for, the best that they can communicate that. And then the next thing is you got to do something about it. You can't just say, I feel this way. I need this. I need that. And then sit around and have a pity party. You've got to be active and you've got to ask for what you need. And resources are available. There are family friends that would sit with your loved one. There are people that can support you. And I often say, if you and your loved one have a bad relationship, if you don't get along, you probably are not the right person to do the hands-on caregiving. But it doesn't mean you get to check out. It doesn't mean that you don't continue to be the daughter or the son. It means that you figure out a way to stay healthy and put down the boundaries that you need to put down, but you maintain that relationship because we are to honor them, whether they deserve it or not.
Yes, no, I truly agree with that. And I appreciate you sharing what they need to do because I do feel like with so many parents, I mean, all the baby boomers retiring and these, people our age are going through that now. They're either passing or they're at that place where they're, having to give up some of their independence and maybe they have a disease, as your parents did, or they have some other kind of, disease, cancer or something like that they have to be taken to treatments, or kidney disease where they got to do dialysis, and they need that support, that loving support. And I appreciate you saying that if there is that bound or that wall there, then it's not that you check out, but you just find different resources, and participate from a distance, that is very helpful. Oh, this is a lot. I feel like a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this and can reach out to you for help because, well, the question I had was, you were talking about resources. So does every county or state have resources that are available to help? And if so, what are they?
So the one that you want to look for is the Area Agency on the Aging. Every county has an area agency on the aging. And through that county, they have all kinds of grants and different things that are available. Some of them have cheaper support, like you can hire someone for $12 an hour versus $22 an hour. There's usually limited amount of hours that they can work for you, but there are opportunities. They're also the place you can plug in to get the hot meals delivered on Meals on Wheels. And so again, a lot of times people are taking those things on themselves, and it's one more thing I have to worry about, when actually there's resources available for you to have other people. My number one thing is, do not do it all. You cannot do it all. You are not made to do it all. We're made for community, and this is the exact place to do that. And I think a lot of people will say to me, but Rayna, my parents won't let somebody else come in the home.
I've heard that too.
You have to work on it. You have to find a way to do it. And the one thing I can say is, if they're used to you doing it all, you will be asked to do it all. So out of the gate, when that grass needs to be mowed, don't go mow the grass. Say, Dad, the neighbor boy is trying to go to Africa. Let's hire him to do it. I don't know, whatever you want to say, but find some way for them to be willing to help someone else by hiring someone else to do it. When we think, oh, it's no big deal, I can do that. And you're right, you could, but the future is going to hold more and more things that only you, in their mind, can do, if you're the one who always answers with doing it. So the answer needs to be, let's get that team around them early, doing the things that don't have to be done by you. There are some things that only you can do. But if you don't stop to identify if it's one that only you can do or one that someone else can do, you're going to find yourself overwhelmed and completely bitter and angry. I mean, you just are, because you're managing two lives by the time they're at the end of theirs. You're trying to manage yours and you're trying to manage theirs. One of the first things I said to my sister is, I said, I'm not cleaning house. I'm not taking care of the farm and then turning around and cleaning house with Dad. Just because I'm there that many hours doesn't mean I don't love it. I don't want to do it. And I certainly don't want to do it every day or every week twice, And so looking at what things you can get that support around them. I have a quiz that's called caringquiz.com, and it really lets you look at your team, the personalities of the people in your team, and helps you to see what strengths you might have and what you might need to bring around you. Because one of the funniest stories I have, some of the caregivers were not my cup of tea. I'm just going to say it. And I mean, but they brought out different things in my dad. We had an elderly gentleman that they would literally almost play hide and seek. It was hilarious to watch these two old guys just, they were just so playful for each other. It was a whole different relationship than my relationship with my dad. And so many times bringing someone else in actually changes the relationship and gives them that out. And sometimes having someone there closer to their age, they can relate on different levels, and they can share stories that they both experienced. And it actually is better than if they were around me all the time. I often said, by the end of the third day, I think my dad was kind of like, when are you leaving? So it's like, it was precious time, but there's only so much. So
I love that. And I love that you have a quiz, the caringquiz.com, for people to go to and take to see. And through your seasons of caring, do you provide support to help them build a team?
So I do one-on-one coaching, because there is no cookie cutter process for people. Right. And so having that one-on-one support, we start with just going, what is overwhelming you? Let's just put it all out there and see what's really going on. And then we look at each individual thing and say, what do you need? And we ask those questions to help you be able to get what you need and still be able to provide the support that the parent needs. And so that one-on-one coaching is one way of doing that. I do have a support group that meets weekly, and I've partnered with Nourish for Caregivers. And so Nourish for Caregivers, it's a faith-based support group. We meet via Zoom. So there's people all over the country. We start with prayer and scripture, and we go around the room and see how we can support each other. And we close with me praying over you. And so it is such an important, beautiful time to support each other and find others that are walking at the same time. I also have a podcast. And so on my podcast, I interview family caregivers and we talk about, where did God show up for you? Because we need to look for him. It's a dark, hard time. And sometimes we miss him in the middle of that. And so just hearing how other people are finding him and how he's faithful with them, I think just encourages our spirit and inspires us to keep on going.
I love that, Rayna. Well, I've really enjoyed you being on the show, and you gave us some really good tips and good direction as a caregiver to start taking our power back, to getting our self-care, and to taking that reflective moment that we need to check in with us. How are we? How is our parent or spouse or whoever it is that you may be taking care of? And also that you wrote a book that is marvelous, No Regrets, and it's on Amazon.
Yes, available all major book.
And it's No Regrets.
Hope for your caregiving season.
Hope for your caregiving season. Lovely. So if you need to take the quiz, anyone listening, caringquiz.com. And then I love the nourishforcaregivers.com. I did not know about that. So that's another good resource. I'll list all these in the show notes. And I appreciate you being here and your podcast, everyone. A Season of Caring. So make sure to tune in on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and check her podcast out, as well as our podcast today, because it's going to help so many people. So where can people find you and connect with you?
Best place is my website at aseasonofcaring.com. I am on pretty much all the socials, so feel free to reach out there as well. But regular podcasts, everything are all there on A Season of Caring.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rayna, for joining today and for sharing your journey, as well as how you're giving back and helping others that are maybe going through the same or maybe worse situation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, Real Heart Talk listeners, for joining, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Thank you for joining us today on the 360 Network for Women and Real Heart Talk podcast. We're so happy you could join and hope you stay tuned for the next episode.